Hey folks, Valerie here with a stitch tutorial for leg 8 of the Pennsylvania Road Trip Mystery Shawl. And I am excited about the border that we're going to be working on today. I have done this cute little lace pattern, and you can see it's kind of coming together here. We're going to do another couple rows on that. This motif that's here does not have any beads, but I do have a beaded option, so I'm going to show you how I'm putting the beads, and I'm also going to talk about how we treat the stitches if we're not doing beads. And then most of this video is actually going to be focused on the very edge, the bind off crocheted scalloped edge. I'm going to show you how to do that with both crochet hook and a knitting needle. So let's just jump right in here to our border in progress. As always, we are going to start. Okay. So we've got our, by now you know those stitches by heart, I'm sure. We always start the same way. So we've got our make one, and now we're going to jump in. The motif that we're doing is triangular, and so we're actually using the edge increases to help us increase the first and last motifs. So that's kind of a little clever, I thought. So we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and this brings me over to the center stitch. And the center stitch is the stitch that I'm going to bead. So I'm bringing my yarn to the front because I am making a yarn over here, but I also am going to place a bead, and I am using size 8 beads, so I'm opting with my favorite dental floss threader. If you're using larger beads, you can use a crochet hook for placing the beads, but basically we're going to slip a bead down onto that stitch. And we're going to knit the stitch, but remember, if your yarn has slipped to the back, remember to bring it forward so that you get a yarn over in here, okay? So you want to yarn over, knit your bead, and then you're going to do another yarn over. And now we're going to work the second half of the motif. The first half of the motif was worked with knit 2 togethers. The second half we're going to do slip slip knits. And I am slipping both stitches knitwise, one at a time, and then inserting the tip of the left hand needle there in the front, and then I'm in position to knit those 2 together through the back loop. Okay, there are different philosophies on how to do the slip slip knit. Some people like to slip the first stitch knitwise and the second stitch purlwise, and then knit them together through the back loop. And I tried that in one of my swatches, and what I found is that while the stitches here were less squiggly with the slip slip knits that way, the whole column here, if you can call a diagonal thing a column, was a little bit wider than the corresponding side. And that was something that I could notice from a distance, that these spurs, I guess, seemed thicker. So I switched to doing my slip slip knits in this manner, where I'm slipping both stitches knitwise and then knitting them together through the back loop. So I'm just continuing on here. Okay, so now I'm working on a motif that I have not beaded. So everything is the same until I get to that center stitch. So I am doing my knit two togethers and my yarn overs. And here I know it's the center because it's following the line all the way down to the start. So what I want to do here is I want to knit the stitch through the back loop. So I'm doing my yarn over, and now I'm going to knit through the back loop, and then yarn over, and now I'm on to slip knits and yarn overs. So the reason we're knitting through the back loop is because with yarn overs on either side of that stitch, knitting through the back loop twists the stitch and keeps it a little more stationary. So I'm going to continue on across this row. As I was working across the row, I found a mistake. I am missing a yarn over in between the next two stitches on my needle, and I really need one for the pattern. I am not frogging. I refuse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of scooch some things around, and the yarn over is not on the last row, it's on the row before. Okay, so I'm going to just dip down here with the tip of my needle and pick up that bridge between the stitches, and then I'm going to scoop it over the yarn for the previous row, which would be the equivalent of the purl that we do on the wrong side, and that gives me a yarn over where I need one. I almost never frog if I've lost a yarn over. I'll squeeze one in there somehow and trust that in blocking and wiggling the fabric and such, it'll work the tension out in the end. So how did I catch that? I've learned to read the knitting here, and I know that all of these V's kind of line up going, well, like a V. They're going out, okay? So they should be going out on a slant, and I should always be having a solid stitch land on top of a yarn over. So if I get to a point where it looks like I'm going to have a yarn over be landing on top, I know there's something wrong. I'll also make a note that the demo I'm doing here is for the Mrs. size shawl, and it is a shorter border. We were concerned about the length of the shawl. We were also concerned about yardage. The plus size shawl has a wider border if you go with my design, and I think either way it's really pretty. I will be back to show you how to make the scalloped edge. Now we are to the most exciting part. After all these months of work, it is time to bind this baby off. And we are going to do this with a cute little scalloped edge that utilizes a crochet stitch called a chain. It's really super easy, so don't panic. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. And if for some reason you really just can't stand the idea of using a crochet hook, I'm also going to show you how to get exactly the same effect using the knitting needles. But I think it's just easier with the crochet hook. So that's how I'm going to demonstrate it first. I'm also going to be showing you how to put beads in the edging if you want them. The pattern instructions do not actually include specifics for beads. They have little asterisks where you could put beads, but I'm going to be the first to admit it is super fiddly putting beads in this edging when you're juggling the crochet hook and binding off and doing the chains and all of that. But I'm going to show you anyway because that's what we do here. So first, I have a crochet hook. I am using a size E, and for much of what I'm going to do here, I am going to treat the crochet hook like a knitting needle. Okay, so here's how that works. First things first, guess what we're going to do with this very first stitch? We are going to slip it purlwise with the yarn in front and off the hook. And now we're going to move our yarn to the back. Okay, and then we're going to knit a stitch, right? Look at that. See how that hook just grabs that stitch? And now I'm going to use the crochet hook to pull that stitch through, and that's one stitch bound off already. Easy as pie. Okay, now we're going to do another one. I'm going to knit that stitch, and then I'm going to use the crochet hook to pull it through. Another stitch bound off. Going to get rid of that lovely little stitch marker. And here's where things start to get fun. We're not going to make one. There's no need to increase anymore. We're decreasing, right? We're getting off of this thing. So we're going to go straight into knitting 2 together. Okay, so we're going to knit these 2 stitches together. Whoop. If you want to put beads at the points of all of these little triangles, then this is when you would do it. Okay, so you're going to slip that stitch back to the knitting needle, and I just kind of prop the crochet hook there, maybe hold it a little bit with my thumb, and this is what I mean about fiddly. You're juggling the crochet hook and the knitting needles. And now the beads. If this didn't give such a cute accent, I wouldn't even bother to tell you about it. But I really do think it makes for a lovely little treat to have that triangle done. Okay, so I'm going to snug up my yarn on that, and now I'm going to pull that through the loop. And so you can see the bead is nestled between where we knit those 2 together and the chain that we just looped over. So now we have to do what's called a chain. And I find that with crocheting, it's generally better to hold your yarn in your left hand. So for all you continental knitters, this is going to be easy as pie. Okay, so to chain, you're going to wrap the yarn around the tip of the crochet hook, and then you're just going to pull that through the stitch that you had on the hook. Okay, and that's one chain. So we're going to do it again. We're wrapping the yarn around the head of the needle and pulling that through. You can see I kind of twist the needle towards me so that that hook grabs it. Here we go. We're going to do it again, just like that. And one more time. So we chain 4. We are going to chain 4 between all of our knit stitches that we're going to do. And that chain 4 takes the place of where we were putting yarn overs. Okay, so typically we would knit 2 together, yarn over, and then knit 2 together. Well, guess what? We did the knit 2 together with the bead, and then we did a chain 4. And now we're going to knit 2 together and then pull that through the chain on the hook and chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Knit 2 together. 2, 3, 4. Doing that whole thing again. So here we're getting up to where our center stitch is. So we're just going to pull that right through in 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, come on. Okay, if you're placing beads in your border, it's time for another bead. And this time we're going to place it onto the stitch before we work it. Okay, last time we worked our knit 2 together and then placed the bead. Here we're placing the bead first. So this is just your standard knit bead that we've been doing. Again, it helps to be able to rest things down on the table sliding that down over. And habit has me putting that yarn back in my right hand for the moment. So I've knit the bead, and I've found that here, I'm going to slip that through, and there we go. Now I have to move my yarn back. All right, so now we're on this other half, and remember, on the other half we've been doing slip, slip, knit. So the same rules apply here. I'm slipping those 2 stitches knitwise, and now I'm going to grab that yarn and pull it through and pull it through again. Chain 4, slip, slip, knit, and pull that through. We have come to the apex of our triangle, and this is handy. We're going to slip this first stitch off, which is great because then we can get rid of that stitch marker. Then we are going to knit 2 together. A little more cumbersome there with the crochet hook, but not by much. And then do the equivalent of a pass slip stitch over by pulling that through 1 stitch here. If you're not using beads, you can go ahead and pull it through the second one. But if you're putting beads on the points, this is the time when we stop and we put a bead. Okay. So we go ahead and we work that double decrease, then we place the bead, then we pull it through the chain. Okay. Now, when you get ready to do this, it's real easy for that loop to get long. I just snug that up because I don't want that to be super loose. Okay, and I'm going to move it back to my crochet hook and pull it through. Whoops. Didn't want to go. Maybe I'll go the backwards here. Ah, that was nice. And see, there you've got that cute little bead right there on the hook. How would you do this with knitting needles? So if I wanted to do essentially the effect of the chain, I am going to wrap my yarn around my right hand needle, and then I'm going to use the left hand needle to pull the stitch up and over that wrapped yarn, and that's the equivalent of 1 chain. So I do it again. There's 2. Do it again. There's 3. Do it again. There's 4. Okay, and now I can knit 2 together, yarn over, and again I'm just using that point of that left hand needle to lift up and over. You can do it either way. To me, this is a little bit more cumbersome. So after you finish binding off all the way along the row, you'll have these lovely little motifs. Of course, the ones that I've done here both have beads. I'll continue across the row and do the rest of them, some without beads. But I do have a swatch here that I can show you. This is of the larger size that I did for the plus size shawl, and this one doesn't have beads, and I just think that is so pretty. Now, this one also is not as scrunchy, and it's because this has been blocked, and I pinned all these little scallops out when I washed it and then laid it flat to dry. You can do that, or you can choose not to. Make sure you take a look at the blocking video that Cynthia and I put up together, where we talk a little bit about what are the things you want to think about when blocking. I did also want to show you this too. I'll bring it a little closer here. This was one of my first swatches, and it had me doing the slip knit with slipping knitwise and slipping purlwise. And if you can see, these on this side these diagonal spurs are thicker than the ones on this side that were the knit two togethers. And that was the reason, that thickness, I felt like I could see that from a distance, and I thought that was more noticeable than the stitches being slightly zigzaggy. Well, that's Percy. He's my not a parakeet. He's a cockatiel, and he's saying hello just as I am going to say goodbye. I hope you have so much fun knitting this edging and crocheting off your bind off, and I look forward to seeing your finished project. Have a great day.